led me that way. Um, this has become an opportunity for our authoritarian governments and regimes to really crack the whip and use the pandemic as a reason to crack down on fundamental freedoms. And it's very convenient because you do have to make sure that the virus doesn't spread, and you do want to stop community transmission, but there are also, draconian measures being taken and unfair responses, disproportionate responses taking place where it's becoming very evident that the purpose is not public health, where we see some governments, for example, in Malaysia, had arrested workers who were protesting their working conditions and using the excuse that they're not following the public safety guidelines, but they're being thrown into a prison, into a jail that's not providing social distancing at all. And these are the kind of problematic situations that we're seeing where freedom of expression, the right to organize, the right to protest, all of these are really, really seeing fractures, and many people in power are taking advantage of this situation. And in this context, I'm so glad that my colleagues have already given an opening on the real epidemic of domestic violence and gender-based violence that has been taking place globally. And this is one aspect, I think, of the situation that we see. Women being on the front lines, being having the hardest burdens, but also dealing with the violence that is coming as a result of patriarchal structures. So we see an intertwine of systems of oppression and power causing the barricades. And when we talk about patriarchy, we really have to also talk about capitalism and the fact that the ones who are losing out when we talk about workers and informal workers, that's also a lot of the time women who are in flexibilized contracts or short-term work, short-term contracts, as well as informal work, not just care work, but in many different sectors, home-based work. These are the areas where a lot of profit has been made off of their labor, and yet they're the ones being hung out to dry at this time of crises. And this is not to say that everybody is suffering. No, in fact, we've seen this data that globally, the billionaires around the world have made in an immense amount of profit, almost $1 trillion in profit, if I understand correctly from the figures, just from this period of pandemic. So that means that but the profits and the work is definitely going somewhere. It's not going to the people who need it. If we take the case of the world's largest, richest person, the CEO of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, he is you can see that as a direct example of taking advantage of workers, because the conditions that the workers of Amazon and its supply chain are going through is really problematic. They do not have safe working conditions. They do not have proper workers benefits, and this is the type of situation that we're seeing across global supply chains, and those supply chains very much are sitting in Asia, and the benefits are still lining the pockets of many who are sitting very safely at home, while people are losing jobs, losing money, and putting themselves at risk. And I also wanted to take the opportunity to share some of the work that I've been involved in terms of articulating a feminist response to this pandemic that is also tied to the work that we need to see to tackle the economic inequality, the neoliberal capitalism that has really created these type of fractures, as well as the climate crisis, which is the feminist COVID-19 response collective. Much of the shutdowns took place in March and coincided with the beginning of the Commission on the Status of Women, and that sort of gave the impetus to many women's rights organizations and feminist networks to come together and try to build our own space for reacting and supporting one another. And in that, we I've shared the link of the website in the chat, and you'll see that we articulated 6 key principles that are necessary for a feminist response. Because as I've just shared, women are very much at the front line of this response. Women are very much bearing the burden of these crises. Even when we talk about climate change, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic coming together, we're seeing a rise in child marriage, for example, as a response to the economic precarity that some families are seeing. And these are cycles that we need to break. We need to keep in mind. Emergency responses from governments did not, a lot of the time, have domestic violence in mind. In fact, in some countries, they shut down the emergency hotlines and the counseling centers at a time when domestic violence shelters were really filling up because of the response. There are many instances in several countries of police telling women to go home and then or come back after the pandemic is over, when they've actually trying to flee for their own safety and their own lives. And this is the reason that it's very, very important for us to have these principles in mind in our response. And the work that this collective has been doing, which is I think almost 400 different individuals and organizations from around the world, has been to track the commitments that governments have been making. And we're very much in favor of having more takeover of privatized healthcare so that we can have public healthcare. These are sort of initiatives that we've seen in Spain, for example. We're trying to see where we can get commitments for long-term support in terms of unemployment and so on. And we're also tracking the different responses that are already being done and analyzing what else we can push for. One of the big things that we've been talking about has been in making sure that the vaccine that is being developed at a rapid pace right now be declared a public good. And some countries have committed to that, but some countries have also expressed their doubts about making it a public good. And this is why it's very important for groups to organize and articulate and strategize together. And that's what we're trying to do in the link that I've shared as civil society. So these are some of the initiatives that I really wanted to share and highlight how deeply important it is to have a systemic approach, because piecemeal saying that okay, we solve this problem now and then we talk about climate later, that's not going to work. In fact, this pandemic really highlights the issues of climate as well, because these type of zoonotic viruses will keep occurring so long as our population keeps destroying forests and interacting with other species. So this is also coming back to the same demands that we're making in terms of climate, in terms of rewilding and protecting our forests and trusting rural and indigenous communities for the caretaking of these lands, smallholder farming, all of these initiatives that we really need to bring back and move away from the fossil fuel industry, move away from industrial farming, which is a threat to the planet and a threat to our livelihoods as well as global health. So these are the type of considerations that we're talking about, and I don't know if I've gone over time or not, but but
No,
I'll stop
no,
there.
Sana, thanks a lot, and especially thanks a lot for reminding us that it's really actually not enough to really talk about the symptoms, but also to think how what are the roots actually why we observe the processes we do observe and the inequalities we do observe at the moment, and that we have to think it really in a broader framework and in a broader context as well. And I think it's highlighting inequalities, economic processes, which we are criticizing for some time, but it's already it illustrates it in very clearly what are actually the consequences if something unexpected happened, like the pandemic. And Paula, I would like to ask you maybe, because I think you made up, and that goes in a similar direction, this interesting intersection of gender, class, and caste, which actually is very important also to understand what is happening and what we can observe in India. And I just wanted to ask you, because it also has something to do with politics, of course. It has something to do also with opening up of India in the 90s, integrating it into the global market. I just wanted to, maybe you could give us a little bit more information or share your expertise, what has changed regarding this intersection inequalities, because as far as I understood, it's exactly that why certain groups like migrants and migrant women are especially in the focus now and suffering under the outcomes and the situation of the pandemic. Maybe for all of us who are not so familiar with the Indian context, I think it would be very interesting to get a little bit more of this background information, actually.
Sure. Thank you, Petra. How much time do I have? 1 day? 2 days? No, I
No,
understand.
I know, and we also have to keep in mind how big India is, and that we are not
Yeah,
only talking about a Hindu population. And I'm
right.
completely aware of this. And I
I will
also
just throw some
understand that you are
statistics.
hesitating whom you are presenting in what way and representing. But maybe, I mean,
No.
I
I'm
just,
very candid. I will
okay,
throw in statistics. Okay.
okay, good.
I have no political problems. I am an independent academic, so it doesn't really matter. See, as a result of job losses only for women, the Indian women have lost $216 billion. So you understand the magnitude of the amount of money that poor women, marginal women have lost. If you look at the slums in India, we did a study on three different, cities, Delhi, Mumbai, and Kolkata. In the slums, the lower caste people are over 70%. So therein comes the conjunction of caste, poverty, and gender. Okay. If you look at the informal sector, in terms of the caste, I was telling you that it's overwhelmingly lower caste people. In terms of gender, 92% women workers are part of the informal sector. And the informal sector have been hardest hit as a result of this pandemic. You see, women not only look at, women's labor in terms of, the terminologies that we keep using, essential workers. Over 80% of essential workers in India are women. If you look at women, most of these women are not the doctors. We have a sizable community of doctors in India who are women, but these essential workers are women who are largely women who handle medical waste, largely women who clean up, largely women who do the jobs that other men will not take up. And these are very, very badly paid jobs, with absolutely no support system there. So in terms of government, the government did undertake piecemeal rations, giving rations, etc. But as Mr. Ramnayya pointed out, and as Sanam also pointed out, ecology and economy is completely interconnected. Within 2 months of lockdown, we had one of the most, strongest typhoons in India, the Amphan, as a result of which migrant workers who had returned to villages were completely devastated. 300 villages only in West Bengal was completely razed to ground. There were communities who were putting people in schools wherever they could find. I personally visited some of those camps where 29 lactating women were huddled in one room and all of them were COVID positive. So where is the space for distancing? You know, all these wonderful words of distancing, all these wonderful words are good for people who have money. But, you know, in terms of staying safe in one room, people, the women that I talked to, said if we had lived in our houses in the village, we would be dead now. So it's better to have COVID-19 and see if they survive or not. So, you know, without any support network, the problem is not just COVID-19. The problem started long before. We have gone gung-ho into a neoliberal economy. Fine, that has made money, cash for a lot of people, but we have lost a lot of the support networks as a result of that. You know, we have not been able to look after the poor people, the poor communities, as Venkat was saying, if I may say so, that it is not just the migrant workers, but the rural poor. The distinction between the migrant workers and the poor is completely blurred, because who migrants? Migrates for those skills in their own villages. They came back saying we will not go back to the big cities, but now they
Paula, so we can't hear you well at the moment, and you are also frozen.
So in this situation, okay, hello?
Hello, we had a
Hi.
little break. We couldn't hear you, and your picture was
Okay,
frozen.
can you hear me?
Yeah, it's.
No, can you hear-
I don't know. That is.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, this conjunction of ecology and economy drove gender gap that was already there to severe proportions. Oxfam has a report on that. There are multiple reports on that, and the government has completely failed to be the, you know, the support, give the support network to people, because India's population is very large, and this caste, class, indigenous community conundrum had made the situation even more severe. Thank you, Petra.
Yeah, thank you very much. And sorry, I think it's a little bit the problem with the internet. So, but I think we heard you quite better than we saw you. So sometimes the picture was actually frozen, but I think we got the most important points and also this kind of background. And coming maybe back and introducing the second round. Venkat did already a great job in giving us a kind of overview, and he wanted to go back, I think, to the government activities, and I would highly appreciate, Venkat, if you could actually already focus a little bit on, because we have learned a lot about what happens, how people suffered, and which groups are most affected. But maybe you could also, from the work you are doing with Youth for Action, also focus a little bit on local initiatives which have developed, or whether there are some kind of solidarity. We just learned from Paula that the solidarity and safety networks also broke actually down. And the question is whether you could observe that some new forms of solidarity develop, what you as an NGO are doing in such a situation. Maybe you have a little bit more time and could combine the government initiatives actually with also your experiences and observations on the ground with the people you are actually working, maybe to also bring in their perspectives a little bit into the discussion.
Thank you, Petra. I think now I think somehow this, well, of course, I'm just summarizing here. You can see that on 27th March, more or less, the lockdown was, more or less ordered. And then, of course, one slide is somehow yeah, that's right. And you can see that the government has initiated all these areas of work. By 4th April, there was 37,000 relief camps. There was food camps. And of course, it was, several orders have been issued by the government of India to state governments to take up various measures. I will not go through all these kind of things. Most important thing is this, I wanted to focus here, because finance minister in the month of March has announced for about 24 billion plan. Then today morning, also in the papers in India, there is 1.2 lakh crore plan. It's been that is about $20 billion US, plus around $490 million on 14th May has been announced. And the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, has also released a scheme called Garib Kalyan Rozgar Abhiyan, specifically in 6 states, with around $7 billion, dollars. Now, all this work probably is going on in the areas, and mostly this work is concentrated on probably, on highways expansion, construction industry, small and micro industry, because the focus of the Indian government is to revive economy. So they're trying to push this money, and we have to see the results. Only one point I want to highlight out of this slide is that MGNREGA work, which is a huge amount of relief to the rural population for employment work. It is called Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Assistance Scheme. That is the third bullet. That is where some breakthrough, where government said instead of giving them rupees 182 per day, the wage rate has been increased to 202 rupees, which is still not a minimum wage as per the Minimum Wage Act. So therefore, this is the more or less package the government has issued for economic revival, particularly into the industry sector. And some of this money is also gone for reviving fertilizer industry. Once again, there probably a person like me will have a small question saying that why fertilizer, why not biofertilizers, why not biopesticides instead of chemical fertilizers, which we have seen already the climate change kind of an impact on the countries like us. Probably in a state like Sikkim, where a lot of organic farming has been done, which a Pradhan Mantri of our country is also acknowledges. Probably in the future that change might come. But at the moment, this is the kind of a package which the government has done in India. And of course, there were unions who have come together, and they have 10 major labor unions have come together, because there was this issue of blanket issue of labor work in 3 states at least, saying that well, I mean, the companies are free to exercise their whatever way they want to employ, the way they want to engage, number of hours, all that kind of things. It was a little bit of a discriminatory, so therefore unions have protested, and protest was mostly on this blanket approach of 12 hours of work instead of 8 hours. The companies felt that because we lost a lot of economy, we wanted to cover it, so they wanted to put employees on a more disadvantaged stage. So unions went to ILO. ILO wrote back to Honorable Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister must have taken some decision on that. Of course, one more thing I wanted to link to that particular thing. On 30th March, a PIL was raised in Supreme Court of India, saying that the migrants have to be given all rights, food, shelter, and everything. But Supreme Court rejected on the line, saying that the state governments are solved state governments, and they have been given meals and something like this, what Supreme Court has said. So therefore Supreme Court did not attend to this kind of a request during the pandemic. So therefore the result to that, not only in urban areas, in the rural areas, the migrants had to face all these kind of very specific issues. There was social ostracizations. When the migrants have gone back to villages or in the urban areas, people have not welcomed them, saying that these people are carrying COVID. So therefore they boycotted. We have seen in villages that the migrants who have come back to villages have been put into schools in a very, very difficult conditions. And then many people have been even stoned. So a lot of NGO work and then the support from the local police and the health department had to be taken. But it was very, very crucial. There was a lot of assault. As Dr. Paula Banerjee has already highlighted, there was a lot of class and caste bias. Name it a Dalit, name it a tribal. So therefore that whole thing was multiplied as a social consequence of all these kind of things. So this is more or less I wanted to just summarize, but one thing I want to highlight here, the farmers have suffered hugely because of this huge amount of cyclones, rains. The farmers could not get inputs, neither they could harvest, nor they can harvest market the produce which has been harvested. So the farmers were really sitting at home. They were like a sitting ducks. They were getting all sort of problems. So there were no essentials were not available. So health department as well as NGOs have come on the road. They have supplied all the sort of essentials at the time of need. And of course, Youth for Action has also done a lot of things, because Honorable Prime Minister and Planning Commission, which is called Niti Aayog, has invited all of us NGOs to enter into the field and support to the disadvantaged. So therefore, we respected Pradhan Mantri ji and we entered into the field. Now I would certainly, I will, of course, this is an unfinished agenda a little bit. I will come back to later. But I would like to go to local initiatives as you suggested. There are, this is a small, instead of saying, I would like to, this is a adolescent federation of child where we have promoted. They have done wonderful work. This is an alternative kind of thing which has emerged while working in COVID. We used here social media, mostly digitalization of information technology, and we try to take the advantage of their views. So I just wanted to now this is an initiative by the Adolescent Girls Federation. They went to the officers and also they have used the mobile phones, smartphones, to spread this message that everybody should take enough care by themselves. So this has been become like a people-to-people network. And this is where these Adola girls have played a very greater role. One more similar thing, you go next to Stalida.
We can't. 2 more minutes.
Yes.
2 more minutes. Yeah.
Yes. Of course, this is an example of supporting, pregnant women who have been left out of the whole stream during the COVID because the focus was on COVID. So our workers went door to door to support pregnant and lactating mothers so that maternal and infant mortality doesn't take place. This is the relief work. This is all relief work done by us. Well, this is a migrant worker. Last video. She's come back. We supported with alternative livelihood. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for giving this insight into your work, which you probably have also adapted and which you just showed us to the special situation or the additional challenges the people are facing. It's not that they haven't challenges before, but to the additional one. Thank you for this insights. And so I would like to maybe a little bit shortly give again the word to Paula and Sana, also to get an impression or an idea that I would like. I mean, Sana, you have told us already about your organization, and you have introduced the main issues which the organization is actually targeting, embedding it in a broader context. But maybe you could also shortly give your impression how in Thailand or other countries people are responding. Are there other kind of solidarities going on? Are local initiative coming into existence? I mean, Thailand is not only facing COVID, Thailand is also facing the student protests, and there is a lot of activism going on at the moment. And maybe you could give us, taking, I don't know, Thailand, because I think it's the country where you are most experienced with at the moment, also to say, so what are the results, and are there other forms of solidarity, social networks, I mean, coming from local levels or different organizations and NGOs, just to also, we have talked a lot about the consequences, but I think it would also be nice to learn a little bit how people are responding and what is important actually for them.
Thanks so much, Petra. I think it has actually been very moving to see how, first of all, people have organized at the time of crisis to try and support those most in need. For example, starting community pantries and trying to make sure that nobody has to go without food. So some of those initiatives in the first few months were really moving, but at the same time, it makes you think back to what I was saying earlier, that the wealth is there, it's just not coming to us, which is why it's so important for us to really keep focus on issues like stopping the financing of fossil fuels and taxing the rich and having ending illicit financial flows and all of those things. But definitely the student movement here, it's not fair for me to comment since I'm not directly involved, but I would say that it's student-led, but it's certainly getting a wide range of support from across ages. Some of the demonstrations that I went to, certainly we saw people older as well. One woman I saw with a walker even, and they were there to express that, you know, enough is enough. These are the moments where you recognize that freedom and equality is so important for us to survive as a community, and build as a society. And I think what has also been very beautiful is to see the different ways, not just here but across different networks. We've been trying to make sure that we support one another, whether that's checking or listening or sending something over, sending us something over mail where postal mail is allowed, just to show that we are there for each other at this very difficult time. And I'm seeing that type of commitment through grassroots mobilizing and through existing community organizations and networks, definitely, as they continue to sort of try and make sure that that we continue to fight for fundamental freedoms going forward. And this is what has been really a privilege to witness as far as the activism and protest that's going on over here, because it's not just daring, but it's very creative. The art students are, for example, involved, and I remember seeing them doing a production of Animal Farm with their own masks that they had painted and made themselves. So these are the sort of moments where you see that art and creativity and all of that is just so important to our freedoms and to our survival. So I guess I'll end with that thought of the importance of unity and not forgetting that freedom and equality is so tied to all of these things together.
Petra, you're muted.
Sorry. Now, Paula, what are you observing regarding how people are dealing with these really difficult circumstances and processes you have shown? And I mean, from a scientific perspective, also maybe what do you think? What is needed? Also, I mean, I think Sana has shown what from a lobby and activist position is actually necessary and where to focus on. What would you say from a scientific perspective, also in which direction we should proceed also regarding research and focusy? But yeah, that's the two last question I would like to raise before open to the audience.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been talking about gloom and doom today because, you know, when you talk about COVID, that's the first thing that comes to one's mind. But I'm saving the sweetest for the last, which is now. I have never seen such a level of activism within civil society. You know, yes, in the villages, we had examples of people stopping migrants or the poor, not getting anything. But, you know, over and above, people really gave, people really organized, and nobody really died of hunger when they were in a village or in a city. When they were walking back, they died of dehydration, of hunger. But once they were in a specific area where they stopped, people got the food, people got the aid, not just NGOs, but civil society came out in hordes. So, you know, I cannot complain. The problem, I think, is, and as a researcher, we have dealt with that. We already have a book on COVID-19 and another one on policies and migrant workers. If anyone is interested, I can sort of mail it to you, Petra, or to Monica, and it can be shared. We wrote about it. As a researcher, I think the primary thing that I will place is that we have to rethink our development paradigm. Unless we rethink our development paradigm, it is very, very difficult to reach the poor who really need the help. The neoliberal paradigm that we have selected, the kind of development that we have selected have benefited the rich. It always does. Narega, or the NREGA that Venkat was talking about, is one of the few government initiatives that have really helped. But you know, in this COVID situation, it is very, very difficult. We have to rethink our economy in a sustainable way. We have to rethink which are the sectors that are really, dispossessed. And the moment a community gets poor, the women of that community gets pauperized. You know, we have to rethink that if we have a vaccine, the government is saying, okay, we have elections in Bihar. If we win, we will give free vaccines. No, free vaccines should come first to the poor, particularly the women, you know, within the poor communities, because they are in contact with the aged, they are in contact with the children. And, you know, there has to be, in India in 1975, we drafted a report called Towards Equality. We need that kind of a study now to see where people are dispossessed, because what the picture that we have is a mapping of it. There is deep rooted correlation often with the state and the market that is dispossessing people, and we need to do more research on that. And just because, people often laugh at me and say, you only talk about women. No, I talk about gender. If we look at the other genders, they are in an even worse situation, because we have a deep-rooted homophobic society that does not recognize other genders. And be an honest
Paula,
so we have to, yeah.
okay, so
Rethink development paradigm. Okay, I guess I'll end there since I'm breaking. Okay, that is the most important thing.
Thank you, Paula, for this very engaged input you gave us. And I think it's only the last two sentences we had some interruption. Thank you very much again. I think we got a broad variety of topics you addressed, interesting and thrilling insights and perspective you offered. And of course, it's very difficult to summarize it. And I don't even want to do it, because I also think we have some interesting questions already here. And so if that's okay with everybody, I would read it, but anybody who wants to put it herself can of course also do it. So I'm not really sure whether I can see all the audiences, but everybody who wants to put the question itself, I would like to ask to do it. Otherwise, I would read the question, and I hope I do it in the right way. And I would start now with the discussion. And the first question, at least, which I have on my chat, is actually a question by Christa Wichterich, who raised the question, how are women as food producers and food providers affected? And I'm not really sure who wants to answer. It's probably, maybe we can take two questions together or three, and then you can think about which question you will focus on. So we have the question regarding women as food producers and food providers. We have the question regarding the linking between climate change and the pandemic and the inequalities as a result. So one of the persons in the audience ask actually, and it's a little bit also criticizing, to speak, what happens here, arguing that in Europe, she observed that the climate change activism cooled a little bit down as a result of the pandemic, even though we are all know, and I think some of you have highlighted it very intensively, that it's really connected, and is interested in how it is discussed actually in Asia, whether it's still connected, also probably regarding different levels, maybe also regarding not only the civil society and NGO perspective, but maybe also how whether it's an issue at the governmental level. And we have a third question, at least I had a third question, which is related actually to the cooperation between the countries in the region, whether there are strategies, cooperations, trying to tackling the negative effects of the pandemic. And I have another question from Martina Neuwirth, who said thanks to all the panelists, as actually all the others people who questioned it as well. And she's interested how you see the role of China in the crisis from your regional perspective. So we have these 4 points. It's all of the questions are really big. And So maybe to shortly summarize, it was the role of women as food producers, the question of how cooperation in the region does exist actually to tackle the negative effects of the pandemic. And I put this maybe together how China is doing actually from the regional perspective. And of course, I know that there are a lot of tension between China and not only India, but also Vietnam and Thailand. It's a very difficult cooperation and interaction which is taking place. But maybe you could give an impression how China is actually responding to it. And the other question is what we often forget, the relation between climate change and COVID, whether you see that this is treated as I mean, Sana, you said it already, but maybe it would also be interesting to see whether there are some initiatives taking place. So who is raising the hand for answering first? Sana.
This is so challenging, but I'm going to package together a few things. One is that I'm so glad that someone asked about women as food producers, because I think this is not really highlighted enough. And in Asia, in fact, I think the data shows that there of farmers, you can consider almost half of the farming population as women, but they are not landowners. And that's one thing that we talk a lot about in terms of women's right to access, own, and use land. And really, if we want to have a strong recovery in all senses and a strong economy and a society that supports everybody, these economic recovery plans that we are seeing globally, the stimulus plans, they do not need to bail out any banks, any big companies. They need to bail out the working class people, and that means the farmers and the women farmers, who I shared in response to one of the questions there. There's a link to an ActionAid report that shows that women farmers are in fact going hungry so that they can take care of their children, and then they have enough seeds so that they can plant for the next harvest, because they're not making any money off of this current harvest. In fact, there's been a lot of loss because of lockdowns, not meaning that the harvests could not take place on time in a lot of places in the world. With regards to climate, I've already shared a few points that it's very hard to ignore climate, because we've just seen a typhoon hit Philippines just this week, and previously there was Typhoon Harold in the Pacific. Just a few months ago, my own country, Bangladesh, and parts of India was flooded, and the question of social distancing, as Paula was saying, was just impossible because people were in cyclone shelters. Where do you physically distance there? But in all of this, I also want to bring in the question of conflict, which we haven't talked about as much today, because when you raise the role of China, one thing that we should not forget is that China is at the moment keeping under the Muslim Uyghur minority in detention camps right now, and this is a very sad circumstance, not just in China, but we've seen a recognized genocide in Myanmar that there has been no accountability for. In fact, there has been a re-election of the government just this past week. So we're seeing a lot of, not just the climate crisis, but a lot of issues of women, peace, and security going under the carpet because of this, the forefront crisis of the pandemic in front of us right now. But it is a very worrying situation right now in terms of conflict, in terms of oppression of minorities, and none of these problems will go away. But this is a moment to say that we should defund militarization, because what's the point really? What are the militaries doing right now to help us out of any of these crises? And for that matter, military budgets can be now allocated to the things that we need, the social services, the public goods that we really need to support our communities. And on a happy note, we do know that the the treaty to ban nuclear weapons is coming into force in January 2021. So that's at least one thing that I hope our governments will stop spending money on. And on that note, I will pass it over to my colleagues.
Thanks a lot, Paula. Maybe, Paula, there is one specific question to you.
Yeah, I will address that.
Yeah,
I will
okay,
address that.
perfect. Then I don't have to
Yeah.
repeat it. Thanks.
Yeah, you don't have to repeat it. Yes, this is very, very, worrisome. this new FCRA bill that is particularly directed towards NGOs makes that we cannot spend more than 20% on admin expenses. That means, rent, that means, our connectivity, that even means salary of the people working. So yes, it is very problematic. We are fighting against it. But today's topic is very well highlighted, that what can you do if you are faced with an authoritarian regime? I think the only thing to be done is people's movement. Nothing happens without people's movement. We have to organize, but it has to be remembered that this government has come with a huge mandate in India. And, I belong to a dissident state. My state government is not the central government. So aids don't come to my state. We hear that so much has been allocated. Why was funding allocated only for 6 states? Why not for all the states? Because people suffering from COVID is there in each and every state. Why was the promise that vaccine has to go to Bihar? Why not to everyone else? It is ridiculous. And, the only way to combat authoritarianism of this level is to produce research, scientific research, and is to organize. There has to be a synergy between the researchers and the people who are working the fields. We are often losing that synergy. And yes, gender activists have been way more successful 20 years back. We have to now reformulate our policies, get in touch with the people working on development, and not just development, but sustainable development, and a certain kind of development where the poorest of the poor get what is beneficial, and not development where we can just show that the state is earning so much or the deficit is reducing. It doesn't matter. The government, when we talk about national security, we actually talk about the security of the border areas. We do not talk about the security of the people. But national security has to be for the nation, for the people, not for the land. What are the arms for? And yes, China and India, both these countries are playing problematic roles. We have a border conflict going on, which is ridiculous at this point of time. Our only enemy should be COVID-19 and our climate degradation. We should not fight amongst ourselves and waste resources that can save people by trying to create resources where we can kill people. It is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know what is the solution to it, other than for the civil society to formulate so much so that we can be in touch with each other. You living in Austria and I living in India, or Sanam living in Thailand or Bangladesh, or anybody, we have to get together and protest against authoritarianism, unemployment, poverty, which is spawned by a certain kind of political outlook. And we have to appropriate politics for ourselves. Thank you.
Paula, thank you very much. And I think there was another question concerning the rising nationalism and tension, and how this affects the conflict between India and Pakistan, and whether there is some kind of cooperation regarding COVID. I don't know it, but from your response, yet it seems that we are talking about stricter borders, and even instead of cooperation. And maybe you can say 1 or 2 sentences to
Yeah, I mean, India and Pakistan does not need COVID. The state or the government apparatus, they need nothing.
Yeah.
Come an election, they will start fighting against each other, because that's the best way of spawning nationalism.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, there have been cooperation between India and Pakistan. People call it track 3. I call it people-to-people cooperation. There is an organization called the Pakistan-India People's Forum for Peace and Democracy that has been developing meetings, contacts. We as civil society have been doing that. When everything fails, we are still friends. Some of my closest friends are in Pakistan. We get together, we try to organize, we try to protest. but the state apparatus, the state mechanism is a very strong mechanism that we as, peaceful civil society activists have to counter with our arguments. So our arguments get sharper, but I don't know how much impact that has. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Venkat, sorry for putting you as the the last, giving you the last possibility to answer, but maybe taking up the question by Christa Wichterich again about the women as food providers and food producers. I mean, reading the information on your page of Youth for Action, I think this is a very important issue and a very part of your work. Maybe you could put this a little bit into the broader framework and relate that to this question, and also maybe the question between climate change and the pandemic, and how you see it at the local level where you actually are working on and with the people.
Very quickly, I would like to, show this small, research book which we have done. I will share this with all of you.
Okay, thanks.
This is about the contribution by the women and women farmers to not only to agriculture, but also to health well-being of all the men, children, and the nations. So this book talks about very clearly that the countries, particularly in South Asia, I don't know about Southeast Asia. Of course, I have been to Southeast Asia several times, but I did not study. But in South Asia, there is an unaccounted contribution to the national economies of all these countries. What you call system of national accounting. In system of national accounting of each country, the GDP or GNP, which is calculated based on the harvests gone to the markets. Generally, the men takes it to the markets, and the cash economy is handled by the men. So therefore, I would answer in one sentence that the contribution made by the women to the food production and the kind of food providers of all these countries have been ignored by all the nationals in the South Asia context, whether it's a Bangladesh, whether it's a Pakistan, whether it's in India, or it is a China or so. So therefore, the what I was telling you earlier, that patriarchal and this social conditions play even in the economics. And I'm sure a person like Dr. Paula Banerjee knows about it. So this is one of the most important thing which I wanted to highlight on this forum. This is about a food question, the first question. Second question, Petra, Trump, the previous ex-president of United States, and now we hope that the new president would at least sign Paris Accord. That is a crucial for climate change. All the countries, they're all talking about it. They're financing fertilizer industries. They're financing all fossil fuel industries. Even if when you highlight all these kind of things at the highest bureaucratic level, whether it is the United Nations or any other country level, the seriousness to do the afforestation, the seriousness to do the organic farming, the seriousness to reduce these fossil fuel industries have never been shown by any country, including Europe. So therefore, the challenge is not only on India or somewhere, but it is also a challenge in Europe, because people have to wake up at this time. So this is how it is happening. Therefore, you see the seas are getting warmer, huge pollution. Now in India, now the government has said that you wear mask, you maintain social distance, and take all the minimum safeguards of sanitization. You see now in Indian roads, blooming with traffic, huge amount of population, huge amount of pollution. Now, where this pollution will go, from the vehicular pollution will go, from where this all pollution will go, it will come back. So along with the COVID infection, you have a COVID infection. Now this climate change would multiply, the numbers in the coming days. So therefore, it will be very, very difficult, and it has to, now taken a kind of a challenge by the public themselves that, this is not spread. So therefore, there is a challenge for the government. there is a challenge for civil society and public also on this particular count. So this is what I wanted to share with you.
Thank you very much, Venkat. But could you maybe just shortly in 1 or 2 sentences say, I think that was the main interest of the question, was the observation that due to the pandemic, it seems that the climate activism is somehow decreasing or getting invisible in public, because especially in Austria and other countries, we talk only about the pandemic, if it's not American elections, but the pandemic is the main topic. How would you judge that? Is there a kind of, do you have the feeling that this topic is getting less important because of the pandemic, and the discourses and everybody talks or is busy with thinking, talking, and handling the pandemic, so to speak?
I think I agree with you, because of this pandemic, the climate change is taking a backseat. Yeah. But you know very well, we are conscious citizens, so therefore we are raising this issue. Therefore, I have raised this issue, saying that we are not only having a COVID, but we are also having a very, very serious, we are sitting on the atom bomb. Let us say, China or some country need not make and invest money on destroying other countries. we can destroy ourselves. So therefore, climate change is an atom bomb. And activism has to come back. And of course, I mean, it has taken a back seat, and it will come back, because people will not keep quiet, and they will come. And for us, Europe, for example, Greta Thunberg, a child from Norway, is a kind of an inspiration now to all of us, for all our children. The way she has done the kind of, I think that is the kind of a process we should take up. We should do networks. We talk about networks, we don't do networks. That is the weakness in our civil society.
Thank you very much for this very clear statement, and hopefully motivating all of us as well. So I would propose, we have 5 more minutes to go, and at least from my reading and the information I get from the backstage supporter team, I think most of the questions have been raised and answered as far as possible. So maybe we could end this very interesting panel, and I'm very thankful. I mean, sometimes a panel raises more questions than answers, but I think we got a lot of answers. We tackled a lot of topics. Actually, we should make now actually a second panel where we really go deeper into some of the topics you raised, and which are much different maybe from the perspective of us planning these. But thank you very much. Maybe we can make a short last round, and you can say just 1 or 2 sentences. What is the importance of the pandemic? What is for you the main outcome or the main challenge or of this time we are living in, and we are sharing, maybe not personally, because I think this is answer to the question Gerald has put on the net, but maybe when you think about development, when you think about how our countries and the whole regions are going to develop. Maybe we can each of you can put this together in 1 or 2 sentences as a final statement for us also to take with us. And I will start with Venkat this time, because you have always been the latest. So this time I would give the first to you, the last words.
Thank you very much, Petra. I was, really blessed, because 2 very great women spoke before me, and I salute to both of them. So therefore, there is it is a pleasure. So only thing I would like to say is that a country like India, only one, that their GDP for health has to be improved. The fundamentals should be addressed. And the climate change is a very, very important area. And last thing I would like to say, as my colleagues also said, networking is very, very important thing. So if we can do the networking, probably we will keep all these flags, alive. So therefore, I think that is one of the very important thing. Dr. Paula Banerjee has already spoke how Pakistan and India, so People's Forum. I was also part of it a long time ago with the South Asia Partnership with Rohit Nupali in Nepal. We have done a lot of work like that. I think those kind of lively work only will come back and keep our development alive. So this is only the message I would like to give it.
Thank you very much for this message and also for the slight optimism which came along with. I think it's also very much needed in these times. Paula, what are for you the most important conclusions you
Yes,
draw
I
from
have
the situation?
3 things. One is COVID-19 has clearly showed us where the inequalities lie. We were aware of that, but it has brought it back to us slam bang. Now we can see it right before us. To correct thus, we have to organize ourselves, we have to energize ourselves, and we have to reach across borders, work peacefully, because we are a world community. The COVID-19 showed us that we are all together suffering in this world. So we should not erect borders. We should not work against each other. We have to work with each other, and we have to energize the youth of our country and our world, because the youth is becoming too satisfied with their material advantages. They are not exploring, and yet they have enormous energy. Whenever they've come into a movement, they've been able to take the movement forward. So we have to problematize our situation. We have to show it to the youth that it is their future that we.
Thank you very much. Even though, I think the Friday for Future movement has also showed that the youth is
ethnicity sensitive world. So sensitivity is the most important thing.
Yeah, okay. So thank you very much. And Sana has moved to, not to outside, but show us that she's sitting now outside. Sana, what are your conclusions or the most important points you draw from the crisis, which is not over yet, the pandemic?
Well, I want to defend the youth a little bit, representing a millennial myself, because I think that we are organizing and we are unsatisfied with the lack of action so far. But I agree that when you are neutral, when you are not engaged, that's the problem. And I go back to what Paula said earlier, organizing is so important. I believe in the power of organizing, in the power of community movements, in the power of autonomous feminist movements. The previous UN Human Rights Commissioner, when he was outgoing, he said that the hope is coming from community leaders, because the real, heads of state are not going to be the ones who are going to build a better world. It will be community leaders, and it will be local organizing that will take us forward. And I guess I leave you with one of my favorite chants for whenever I've been to a climate march or to rally, which is the people united will never be defeated.
Thank you very much, Sanam, as well. I would end this panel because I think we had 2 fascinating hours, and I know that these internet sessions and using these internet tools is always a little bit more tiring than sitting in a room, sharing together, getting the kind of spirit. And I think but I think we had such a thrilling discussion. Thank you very much to all of you. I think we all learned a lot, but we also saw a lot of similarities also already at this stage. So I wonder what the conference will make out of it when these the discussions will be discussed together and will be brought together. So thank you for joining. Thank you for your inputs. Also, thanks to the audience for raising interesting questions. I know that we would have needed much more time because each of the questions could have been discussed in much more detailed, but they are not gone. I mean, since we are doing it in the via new media. They are also written down somewhere. So it's also maybe for the Paulo Freire Center and for planning the next conference, interesting issues which have been on the floor. Thank you very much again. And I think we will end this session at that point, and I will give Gerald the words, I think, for some concluding remarks. Sorry,
Yes.
Gerald, for, yeah.
Thank you very much. Also from my side, Petra, there's not much that I can add to your comments to this fascinating panel. Thank you, the three of you, absolutely. I already opened it. You have the screen sharing where you can write down which words in this panel resonated with you. I put the link to this tool in Slido in the chat. A lot of people already used it. You see a lot of interesting, important, touching terms there on the screen. This is also part of the feedback you get. I think the really important messages that really touched us as an audience. I now want to invite you for our next panel in the afternoon, because we will have a break now because with the new media it's very makes tired. But in 2 hours, 2 in the afternoon in Austria, we invite you for the next panel, and it will deal with Latin America, Brazil, and Peru. You see here the slide about the topic and the speakers, Camila Moreno, Ivo Lespopin, and Tarsila Rivera Zea. I hope to meet you. You can use the same link as you used now for this Zoom meeting. So this is working again, even if in between I will have to stop the Zoom. So to have also a break. We have also a recording of this panel that was as a live stream directly during our meeting here at Facebook. You find it at Entwicklungstagung in Facebook/Entwicklungstagung. We will put this also on our website and the link also in the Slack channel we have. You still remind at the beginning, I told you we have also the option to have exchange in Slack. I can show you this again, and my colleague Monica already shared the link in the chat. We have an own channel to continue the exchange, especially to the topic of COVID and inequality in Asia. So here, please, you can put remarks and questions that were not answered, questions they are still open. There's a lot of material, a lot of questions and discussions still open that we still have to continue. You can put also links to studies or to other events, as well as in the channel for networking. And if you like to make small talk, you are invited to do this also, especially in the break time that I now want to start. And with a big thank to the panelists and also to the audience. Again, I now say goodbye and see you again. I hope so in 2 hours. Okay, have a nice break, and I now start our final movie as organizers. Thank you very much.